morning. Thank you for joining us, everyone. This is Billy Bob. We are episode 30 of our Blowback Roundtable. We've got a full roundtable today. We got Ben in Hungary, Ian in Moscow. Vladimir, are you in New York City?
I am in Providence, Rhode Island.
A little bit off. Sorry about that. Providence, Rhode Island. And you are a professor of English literature at Brown University?
Slavic studies.
Okay. Did they change that after the SMO, or has it always been Slavic
No,
studies?
it was always been Slavic studies, yeah.
And then Carlo is in Washington, D.C. So our title of our episode today is called Israel Goes Rogue. That's a little bit of a reference to the media reports that the U.S. is really trying to hold back the Israel government and Netanyahu from continuing to, engage in the way that they have. And so there's, this understanding that Israel's going a bit rogue. So we're going to talk about that. Right. I was going to pass it to Ben, though. He was going to set us up for our first discussion.
I mean, that's the discussion, basically, because Israel, everybody in Washington is convinced that they follow the line that Washington grants them because of huge amounts of money and all that. But when Blinken left Washington, D.C., the news was he brings a request or something. Yeah, it was phrased like that, a request of not a ceasefire, but it was called a humanitarian pause. Like Biden basically wants a humanitarian pause, and he sent Blinken to Tel Aviv. And Israel just hung him out to dry. No, we can't, like he rejected it twice, Netanyahu did. We're not going to do any such thing. It's not in our interests. It's not in our long-term plans and anything. By the way, the latest news is that the only authority left in Gaza soon will be Israel. So no international intervention and all that. So then he went and flew around to the Arab nations, to Jordania, absolute cold shoulder there. He went to Iraq with the vest. Bulletproof vest is a beautiful image for flying over to friends for a nice request. Then he went to Erdogan's Turkey, which has said they didn't actually seize all diplomatic relations with Israel, but they said I have written off Netanyahu. That was the official line from Erdogan, who didn't even meet him. Can you imagine that? Because that is the Secretary of State from the US landing in a shitty little plane. And on the tarmac, it was only, I think, the governor of wherever he went. I don't know if it was Ankara or Istanbul, but wherever he went, and then, go to the rain, try to meet Erdogan. He didn't. He met Hakan Fidan, the foreign minister, and then he flew away 2 hours later. And everybody told them, everybody around here, we need a pause. We need a ceasefire. I thought you would be able to get that. And it looks like that chain or whatever leash Israel was on, or at least Netanyahu, seems to have broken. And I just maybe get your thoughts on that situation. That's what it looked like to me, mining the headlines,
Ian, what are your thoughts?
Well, did you? Go ahead.
I do have a thought on that. So, within a couple of days of when that Hamas attack that caused a flood, I'm butchering the pronunciation of that, but when that operation started, I wrote pretty early on. I was pretty astonished about the Israeli response because one, they just the sheer amount of territory and the sheer, just the success of that Hamas attack was astonishing, considering what they were up against. And I was also astonished by how big the Israeli government was talking. We will destroy Hamas. And actually, Ben, if you could share that picture, that would be
They always do that, though. Absolutely. I'll share a screen in a second. This is what Ian wanted us to see. And it's a very interesting tweet from a lady I don't know.
Yeah, so this is just no one really knows who she is. This is a random person. When they tweeted, I will destroy ISIS. And that's really what it made me think of when Israel's like, we will destroy Hamas. And it's just like, it's a very, because, in marketing and sales and marketing, there's a saying, to under promise and over deliver, tell your client, I can do this, and then give him more than what he asked for. Then he's very happy with you. But Israel is doing the opposites. They're making very, very bold promises, and also they were slowed. And I said that right, even within the first week of when this started, they're being very slow to respond. If they attacked right away, it'd be one thing, but it's just public opinion, global opinion is turning against them. If they had reacted quickly and overran, steamrolled Gaza right within the first week, they'd probably be able to get away with it because it would just happen before anyone could react to it. But now we're a month into it.
Yeah.
It's
11/7. It's exactly a month into it. Yeah.
So
they call it 10/7 now. That's where the history of Hamas and Israel began. 10/7. That's it. Nothing before.
Yes, nothing happened. No context before that. That's what. But yes, it's a mess.
So Ben, that's Ian, that's a good point about the overselling. Can they even do that? That's an excellent point. My thought when I heard Ben's opening comments about Blinken being snubbed, to me, I'm like, this is for domestic consumption, right? So it's not, they have a very angry population, and there's no chance that the Jordanian monarchy can demonstrate that they have a good relationship with the U.S. or with Israel at a time like this. But does that really mean that the relationship is on the rocks? No, I think it's just kind of a show. So that was what I was thinking when you brought up your those points, Ben. Ian, go ahead.
I thought Ian was veering into another territory that I want to discuss, but on your point, I think the King of Jordan said that any expulsion of the Gazan or the West Bank population into their territory or Egypt constitutes a casus belli, an act of war. We are declaring war. That's at the same time as airplane after airplane of US fucking weapons arrive there. So you're right. There's absolutely two, like a public side and a private side to this diplomacy. You're right.
Well, we also have to add that, and what you said, Billy Bob, I think is dead on, because Egypt, Jordan, they are U.S. allies, but their populations are absolutely pro-Palestinian. So that really puts their governments on a tightrope where they want to fulfill their promises to the USA and honestly, by extension, to Israel, whether anyone wants to admit that or not, but they have to placate the mob too. It's tricky. It's not good for stability.
Vladimir.
If I can add something to what Ian is saying, is that the whole thing is, of course, very complicated in my view. That is, it's not just Jordanian population is split from the government. I think Western Europe and partly United States population is also feels differently from the government. Government, US and Blinken, whatever, their interference is, of course, as they say, is too little, too late. They are kind of, been showing the failures of American foreign policy again, and again. So I'm not surprised that this is another kind of fiasco. From putting all the eggs in one basket of Kiev, supporting Ukraine, ostracizing Russia, pushing Russia, which is a very important player in Middle East. With the Russian help, they could have found some kind of meaningful solution. There should be some kind of meaningful solution found. Of course, we can discuss what's happened within the month, and there is tons of mistakes have been made, tons of kind of cruelty has been committed. But I think that, unfortunately, we're just getting the results of years of rather misguided policy. That is, for a while, Israel was not forced to make any kind of meaningful concessions, meaningful negotiations, meaningful kind of, way of solving this. So it was there. Furthermore, there was also kind of certain clear arrogance of power, both United States arrogance and Israeli arrogance, just to blow off this major preparation. Honestly, if Netanyahu had any integrity, he should have resigned the next day, because he should have just found some other leader, because he was busy with some kind of ostracizing half of his population with some reform, judicial reform. That was he was busy doing. Another part he was doing is helping West Bank, the settlers there, hoping or thinking or getting intelligence that attack will happen there. So he definitely, he used this term of overcompensate or oversell. He definitely blew it. He missed it, and now he tries to compensate. So these are kind of all the bad decisions, throwing bad money after frame good money up to bad money. I'd be very happy to contribute, to bigger view of this. But I think it's just what we see is consistent failure of arrogance and the conviction that what we in State Department or we in Netanyahu cabinet know is the final truth. It's not the final truth. The whole thing is much more complex, and we see how they solve one issue, another one. They talking about Turkey. Of course, U.S. needs Turkey, NATO needs Turkey, and Erdogan knows that. So
Speaking about protests, Vladimir, just to add to your point about Turkey, that was one of the major, like a big, I guess we can call it mob, but a big group of people was trying to get into Incirlik, the US base on Turkish soil, like completely against the norm. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I would add, since we're talking about geopolitics, I suspect that kind of one role which Iran likes to play is some kind of a defender of privilege and Palestinians and abused Arabs and abused Muslims. Not so much Arabs, they probably like to have big umbrella. But I think Erdogan is pushing for this role. I think he always thinks himself as this kind of big sultan, as a defender. I remember being in Turkey on a number of occasions, and every little thing like between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Turks are very much involved. Something is happening in some in Russia, in republics with some Muslim interests in their view encroach. Erdogan and Turkey and press is there. So I think he this is his position, and I think I'm not surprised that he acts like that.
Yeah, he's a magnificent dancer. Douglas McGregor is convinced that he will attack Israel. I'm absolutely not. He sits on 15 chairs at once, which is
yes, that's absolutely true.
15 chairs at once. That's a good point.
Yeah. I saw a headline on he is hanging on by a thread even currently, but even before 10/7 Netanyahu, and the headline in Bloomberg was Mr. Security's image fades as people want him out, and that was in Israel. So just to reiterate the public opinion, I mean, all over Europe, I think the largest one in Jakarta, Indonesia, the largest pro-Palestine protest in history took place. I saw New York Central, I think, pretty much locked down for an anti-Palestine protest, maybe even the Statue of Liberty. I think that was recent or something like that. But the other thing was in Israel, in Tel Aviv, they were these people getting close to Netanyahu's house, saying resign or get basically the people back, the prisoner exchange. So it's going totally the other way. But since you brought in geopolitics in Russia, what we can monitor is the change. And I wonder if you saw Vasilina Benzi, I think his name, is the permanent representative to the UN. And he said, because Israel is the occupier, it has no right to self-defense, which is a big statement from Russia, because 1.5 million Russians live in Israel. And it's always been a difficult, very balanced approach to the region. And that to me was very new. Does that signal something new?
I was very much kind of surprised. I honestly, to relate it properly, one have to read probably his whole speech. What I do know that practically for a fact that Putin will continue and Lavrov, they will continue their balanced policy. They know they're not going to put all eggs into this Arab basket, because Russians who actually Soviets in particular felt betrayed by a lot of Arab world when they were very much for them against Israel in the 60s and 70s, and a lot of Arabs then went to America and so on, a lot of Muslim world. So I think they will never ever bet on one side, but they will never bet on the other side either, especially in light, there's definitely some kind of rift between Russia and Israeli policy, because Israelis were not playing an ideal role vis-a-vis Ukraine. We know that they send some of the instructors to Ukraine. They know that one way or another some equipment ends up there. A lot of Ukrainians are marching day in, day out in Tel Aviv, whatever, protesting, wearing Ukrainian flag on the one hand, Israeli flag on the other, and somehow kind of merging these things. And, Russians look at it, they're not happy. And, from what I understand, actually, even Netanyahu was like more understanding of the situation, as opposed to previous, what's his name, Lapid. He flew to Kiev. All other leadership flew to Kiev, supporting. They were driving on the prospect of the mass murderers of the Jews. These are the prospects they were driving. So there's a lot of Russians think, what are you doing? Why, where's your integrity? Why you? So it's kind of, so Russia have issues with Israel. Maybe Neben's statement somehow kind of reflects it, but I don't think they're going to take one side or another. They will try to plead some kind of, commonsensical sort of, sitting at the table, negotiating that. But I don't think what Nebezhny wanted to say is that Israel should sit quietly and let bombs fall, because it really would challenge all Russian doctrines as well. So I wouldn't.
Oh no, I agree. He was just citing international law, basically the UN.
Yeah.
The record of UN,
which is important, because UN, we now are not happy, or might be happy what Gutierrez said, but Gutierrez always takes absolutely one-sided position vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine, because Gutierrez views, probably when discussing Russia and Ukraine, he views Russia as like the rest of the world views Israel vis-a-vis Palestinians. Russians are bombing, Russians are indiscriminate, Russians are bad, stop this butchery. That's what UN does. So he tries to show that UN own kind of hypocrisy, and why are you taking this position here, this position there? And he was challenging Nebenzia, UN like myopia. So I guess he probably pushes. I agree with you, Ben.
Yeah, I agree there too. I mean, the Soviet Union was one of the founders of the UN. So they don't challenge the UN. What they do is always refer to the founding documents, the charter, saying, why aren't you abiding? Because there's more civilians dead in 30 days in Gaza than 600 days in Ukraine.
Exactly.
Where's the ICC? There's a warrant for Putin. There's warrant for Maria Belova. I think we're at 3,000 children, maybe 4. But no arrest warrants, nothing like that. So yeah, exactly. I think he was pointing that out. Yeah.
No one is expelling Israeli citizens from the European Union either,
or the Olympics,
or saying or sanctioning Israel. God forbid.
There was recently a lot of Russians were unhappy. There were as a Russian Petersburg theater group, which was very popular in Israel before with performances. So they staged some kind of a play which deals with, with 19th century Russia, anti-Semitism, bad Tsarist regime, something like, Fiddler on the Roof or something. So they did that. They bring it to Tel Aviv. What's happened in Tel Aviv? Ukrainians and all this kind of do-wishes protest. We don't want Russian stuff here. and they actually close the play. The Russians have to go back. So this is another kind of totally dysfunctional kind of situation there. That this U.S. dictating everything, Israelis living in a different part of the world trying to accommodate U.S. in response try to accommodate Israelis, and I don't think it's a very good combination.
Yeah, terrible image.
What about the parallels between what Zelenskyy is saying, how you got the West needs to support us because Russia's next victim is going to be, Western Europe. He's not going to stop with Ukraine. He's going to continue on. And then Netanyahu kind of is saying the same thing about Iran. He's like, all the West has to line up against Iran. We have to attack Iran. We have to destroy Iran, because if Iran isn't destroyed, Iran's going to start attacking Europe. So similar rhetoric in order to try and get, allies on their side.
It's very cynical. That is, think about it, that U.S. traditionally, Cold War, the enemy was Russia. Of course, then since this hostage crisis, big American enemy is Iran. So it pays to demonize Iran. It pays to demonize Russia.
It's the new axis.
Yeah, exactly. There's axis of evil, and that's how they're going to do that. So if you want to present anybody in a bad light, it's connected to Iran, it's connected to Russia, and that's what they're milking, which is like based on absolutely nothing. Iran probably have to play this kind of maybe role, intellectual role, spiritual role, but I don't think it's ready to push, and invade. I don't think they have that interest. The same thing about Russia. Forget it. This is not the Soviet Union, which wanted to maintain this kind of. Now Russia just totally withdraw and stays there. And if they want to trust Zelenskyy on that, who the liar, cheat, demagogue, and so on, it'd be very naive.
It's a new domino theory.
Yeah,
It was applied to Vietnam.
exactly.
I'm just in a state of utter confusion because we have Ukraine, the situation in Ukraine, and the situation in Gaza, and this, and you look at public opinion. There are tens of thousands of people in the streets supporting
In DC, in your
the
city.
Palestinian yes, supporting the Palestinian cause. When it came to Ukraine, there were protests, but none supporting Russia. There were protests supporting Ukraine, and I'm curious if we went to those crowds in DC, for example, if I were a young man again with a microphone and a camera, what result would I get if I asked these people protesting is the Israeli incursion or whatever you want to call it, defense plan, whatever you want to call it, where they stand on Ukraine? I would love to see that, and I would, but I can tell I know in my mind they would most of them would support Zelenskyy in Ukraine down there, and I'm so that kind of disconnect just leaves me, I have to say, flabbergasted. I'm rendered silent, and I'm not often rendered silent. I don't know where to take it. Anybody have any?
I fully agree with you, Carlo, and that's how I feel, and that's what makes me very nervous. So these guys, they might be like, think that they are doing a good thing, but in a minute, if you turn around, they will be supporting great noble Zelenskyy against evil Russia. So then, and I have my doubts about that narrative. So it's very complicated. I don't know. I mean, everybody wants to show how good they are and do this signal, but I think there is not enough understanding, knowledge of the whole, this place, Middle East place, here's this place. So I think people, marching, of course, and I would say they're marching because they are, to some degree, victims of, mass media. Because what mass media shows day in, day out, Russian, and even fake, they would show like Russians bombing the city in Kyiv. Then we learned it was like Ukrainian bombing Donbass. They would show that. But of course, people see the bombs, they're protesting. Here we have Gaza. Of course, it's for everyone to see. But this is like they like trigger everyone. But ultimately, I'm very curious about the schizophrenic role of Western media, and are they just trying to psych us up, so we start biting each other all the time in anger? I really don't know.
I'm reminded by one of the CIA directors, and he said, once the American people are so politically ignorant and confused, they don't know they're up from their down. That's when we know, our task is accomplished. So there's part of that, but also it's victimhood, right? Like Palestinians have been widely seen as a victim in more increasingly so in Western media. In my lifetime, I've seen, the amount of pro-Palestine coverage increase. And I think that's good because, of course, they are a victim. But at the same time, Ukraine has definitely been portrayed as a victim of Russia's aggression. And so, it's this. I think it kind of buys into identity politics, and wanting to be a victim of identity politics also plays into supporting, the perceived victims internationally. That's so. Ben, you have an image here that we're gonna show. I'm not sure what it is.
I didn't prepare this, but I got this from Chinese social media with the
Chinese
English
social media.
They're just much more sophisticated than the Western people, and I think it says it all. You see, if you have the two flags, Ukraine and Israel, on you, that's the dogs of the U.S. empire, whereas Palestine and Russia, that means fully understand the core of international geopolitics. I thought that's something to show. Then there's anti-war people who are just like That's the principle. They don't care about what happens. And then there's the social Darwinists, you know, the stronger
No,
bulls trot.
I do appreciate that. That is very, very intuitive. I fully endorse it.
So yeah, we've been 2 years badgered by media narratives concocted around Russia, but this thing is 75-year-olds. It goes back to the Nakba, people carrying keys, you know, and people can't forget. And everybody can seek out videos right now, you know, even though the power and the internet goes in and out from Gaza. I mean, going back to hospitals, bakeries, ambulances, you can see these things now. And thank goodness there's this enormous gap between public opinion and real. I mean, I don't know if you follow some of these grifting idiots. Ben Shapiro comes to mind. Unfortunately, so does Tulsi Gabbard. Obviously, who's the young Kennedy? RFK Jr. I mean, let's not even talk about Nikki Haley. But they've gone completely mad on the Zionist side. And there's an enormous gap between them and most of the people. I mean, a lot of the articles, one after the other, said Biden is losing the voting people, the supporters, even people in the party are against him now. And they're trying to frame it as, well, yeah, the Democrats are losing. But, you know, even on the Republican side, I'm just thinking the political elite is losing grip at home. They're absolutely losing diplomatic clout, image around the world. The protectors of freedom and human rights, which they managed to kind of hang on to, if you lied to enough through Ukraine, has just vanished. It looks like under 3 to 4 weeks. It's just gone. No one can make that excuse when you see these horrific pictures that we can't show.
Vladimir, do you see that happening? Do you see the credibility and, you know, the hypocrisy just destroying the image of the West in general?
I think the West definitely is not, its image is tarnished very, very much. And I think I wouldn't even, I actually like to see Gabbard. And
Me too. I liked her. That's why it hurts.
We should, approach things kind of comprehensively. And I agree with Ben that, we should go back. If we consider Israel, it's a very complicated society, complicated country with, a lot of injustice which they've done, also a lot of justice they've done. They actually turn the country around. It produces many good things. So what I think what should have been done is the West not giving Israel, especially people like absolutely hardcore, kind of maniacs like Netanyahu became recently. They shouldn't give them a blank check. What should be done, but again, could be done within an international framework. It's like children fighting. We can have in the kindergarten. Granted, one child is fatter, bigger, stronger than another, but these children have to find some kind of the way. And rather than one parent give the strong child hammer, go whack them, another one gives the smaller one hammer, go whack back. That's what the international community is doing. There are serious issues, and I remember you can talk and see. I've been in Israel a fair amount of time. Both of my parents are actually buried there. I go there. Come there like Russian, American, Jew, whatever, and I talk to all kinds of people from all over, and I hear only one thing: we want peace, and we're ready and willing, and we want to negotiate. I travel through Jerusalem, talk to Arab people in the taxis or whatever. They won't negotiate. I don't think anybody is among common people stress, wipe them out. No, this is politicians. This is what they're doing. They actually want to make some kind of a deal. But is it being made? Are they forced to make a deal? There should be definitely concessions on both sides. That's how I view it. But to bring up these concessions, West and Russia and China have to have enough authority, enough strength to bring them up. Without it, it'll be like one-sided. Okay, here's a blank check for you. Go and bomb Gaza. Here's a blank check for you. Go and send rockets toward south of Israel. And it will continue. Basically, the way I see it, we can be protesting and taking sides as much as we want, but innocent people will be killed. without without like a really comprehensive international community. But we don't have international community because you called your today's show that Israel goes rogue. I think US went rogue long time ago, and
we agree there.
How can they be trusted? How can they be trusted? Then they talk absolutely arbitrary. Now they bomb this country. Now they declare non-existent weapons of mass destruction. Now they do this. So and of course then China is looked with suspicion, but there should be something done because we see how, like violence escalates.
Yeah, I mean, my friend, he's passed away now, William Blum. He entitled one of his books 30 years ago, Rogue Nation. He's talking about the U.S. It's absolutely applicable term.
The original Rogue Nation. The Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar, an interesting fellow, he said exactly the same, that basically these sanctions, I think he was talking about the sanctions against Russia, the US acts as if everybody agrees with them, where everybody knows it's applied selectively. So is the outrage about, children being killed or human rights or all that. So you're right that the primary rogue state is the US. And we can have a scale of opinion on Israel. I don't happen to share yours, but really happy to talk it over. But what the response was, I think that was interesting. Bomb whoever you want, because the latest count I have is 72 warships being sent. Also now a nuclear submarine sent into the CENTCOM region, which is around the Arabian Peninsula somewhere. We can't pinpoint nuclear subs. And the CIA guy, William Burns, was sent to Tel Aviv. I mean, that is the signals coming from the US that you'll have 4 aircraft carrier strike groups at your disposal. Whatever happens, it's just like, I have to say, an enabling of a genocide, even if we disagree.
Well, the forces there, I mean, and that's a debate people have been having back and forth, but I think they're not going to, as of right now, the plan is not to directly participate in it, but to be there as a threat if the situation escalates. So I think that's a concern because if Israel is struggling with orphans, teenagers, literally with homemade bazookas in Gaza, they're not equipped to deal with Hezbollah or Iran. So the U.S. is there, and so it's not so much. So I think, so my take on that is they're not going to directly participate for the most part, but are there if this blows up into a regional conflict. So,
that's
a deterrent,
a good
point.
Deterrent,
yes.
I would say, I mean, it's not. I wouldn't throw this terms genocide or something like that. There is definitely murder, definitely violence. But I think, I was very much influenced by precisely by my talking to all kinds of people in Israel and observing. And what is interesting that Israelis are much more divided on this issue than Americans. In Israel, there is a lot of protests, a lot of kind of, thoughtful people who keep on saying that, yeah, we can win militarily, but it wouldn't lead anywhere. We have to solve this issue. We have to somehow kind of make sure that Palestinians are happy with where they are, a Palestinian Arab. We have to make sure. So, in other words, I remember I saw this amazing film, which is called Disturbing the Peace. It was a documentary about the groups of absolutely hardcore, experienced people on both sides. Palestinians who were accused of terrorism, who spent 15 years in Israeli prisons, Israeli commanders whose friends, brothers were killed, and they're talking and they say, we need to make peace. We just cannot keep on shooting each other because it will never end. Paradoxically, these two hardcore groups, they actually talk to each other, they meet each other, and they hated by both groups. They hated by some radical Zionist Israelis who say, no, we don't want peace. They hated by some Palestinians who say, oh, you bombed us, we have to bomb back. But I mean, this is the reality. That of course Israeli can win militaristically. Of course Palestinians can sort of exercise some attacks and kill people here and there, but it has to be somehow kind of addressed and solved and compromise should be found. Again, I wonder what you guys think about it, but my feeling is that especially in this part of the world, but in many others, the word compromise is a dirty word. It's just a dirty word. You just don't compromise.
Well, that's been the state of Israel's policy for decades now, is no compromise. And I mean, they've been destroying any chance for peaceful settlement by doing the things they're doing in Gaza, in the West Bank, the continual settlement expansion. Their policy seems designed to make sure compromise is not possible.
And provoking anger, because of course that was like violent and vicious attack, but we can say that it came out of blue. It was provoked by many from settlements to a sort of construction on this holy mountain. When I taken religious feelings of another group it's absolutely worse. You can't do that. And then we have this hardcore kind of maniacs in Israel who say we want to take this mountain where mosque is, and we have to restore the Jewish temple. This is what kind of nonsense is this? This is just so it's provoking. No, so there are sane voices which are not heard. Look at our country. Sane voices are really heard. But maniacs who push the harder, the less compromising, the better. They get an upper hand.
I have to say, I hope you're right that they're in the majority, because there are sane voices in Israel, but there's a lot of people on the streets. Unfortunately, you can probably check the videos. It's Nakba 2.0. We're going to kill each and every one of you. There was 100 doctors. This is a document that was authenticated who said we need to bomb more hospitals. I mean, I sort of understand churches because that is considered idol worship in doctrine. Then there's what you call the mowing of the grass, the Dachia doctrine. Then there's Hannibal doctrine, absolutely horrific things. And I hope there's more sane people, but I don't think the people who want Netanyahu out want sort of, a state that existed before 1948, where there were Jewish people, there were Muslim people, there were Christians, and they all lived together without restrictions. Because I mean, as well as anybody else that you get the right to return, and then you get sent very early to Auschwitz, say, this is what happened to me. And then you go into the IDF. And it's very much a cultivation of intolerance. We are the chosen people here, and those bastards need to die, which unfortunately I see a lot of. I hope they're the minority. That's all I can say.
No,
I don't see this as just some loony politicians. That's what I want to say. I see this as very widespread public opinion.
There are two things which I would say from what I observed. Of course, we very frequently media carries the loudest voices. If you go to Tel Aviv, you see these young kids. They are very smart. They're very savvy. They don't want this nonsense. But we also should think about it. And in that sense, I would agree with Israelis. When this attack happened, it was a real shock for them.
I agree there.
So when Americans, if you go to United States, when 9/11 happened and these images played again and again and again, sort of the Bush and everybody felt, I'm not condoning it, I'm not saying it was right, but they somehow felt, let's bomb the hell out of someone. Let's do it. So I understand the feeling of people. Sooner or later they will come down. They sort of figure out that it didn't come out of nowhere, that it was a complicated history, of provocation, of pushing, and how people would look back. But I remember in the United States, somebody on TV asked the question, maybe we did something to provoke that. They were taken off TV. So in other words,
immediately,
one doctrine, we're always right, they're always wrong. So I suspect that's what you hear. But common people, when they sit in the kitchen there in Tel Aviv or in any other places, they probably know that we need to find some kind of a compromise. Of course, we'll give something, they'll give something. But who wants to see their children killed like that?
Yeah. How many more children have to die for that?
Professor Wade Churchill, a great Native American studies professor, lost his tenured position because of his stance on 9/11, for example. What's intriguing to me, and I hate to go back to this again, is this kind of parallel between Ukraine and what's happening in Gaza, and that is if you treat Israel as a prototype of Russia. You have the Ukrainians shelling the Donbass. Now, public opinion never swayed toward Russian speakers in the Donbass. Anywhere in the world I can determine, because of the
in the
media,
West.
basically, because it was shut down. Although hostility toward Russia was always very high. And now, if you have a situation where Hamas has attacked Israel, which could be the parallel for the Ukrainian, let's call them what they are, Ukrainian fascists attacking the Donbass. And when Israel goes in, it receives the same kind of reception among public opinion that Russia is receiving, which is kind of stunning and startling in a way to me, because living in Washington D.C., there's just so much powerful money in support of Israel floating around here that influence in favor of Israel is very strong. Now there is a very, very strong anti-Semitic strain in American culture, exemplified by Donald Trump and his buddy Steve Bannon, who is obviously he's a member of a Catholic cult, so he would have this ingrained hostility. But by the same token, this kind of odd parallel is now taking place, which I find inexplicable. And I'm almost at the point where Norman Finkelstein is at, where I just want to throw up my hands and say, I don't know what's going on. I'm just bewildered. How is it media influence, the lack of historical context, what Theodore Adorno called ahistorical rationalism? What is it that's bringing about these kind of odd public responses to for as far as I can see, rather than any kind of informed logic, historical logic? Because
you're saying, Carlo,
Israel's been bringing this on itself for a long time, for 75
Decades.
years. They've been bringing it was just a matter of time that was going to occur. The situation in Ukraine doesn't resemble that at all. So
I have an answer. I do have an answer.
You're suggesting the U.S. is populated by ninnies. That's what I hear you saying.
That's what I say.
I disagree with that.
I have an answer too, but I kind of want to listen to Ian first.
So I have a friend of mine in Russia, and so she's a pretty liberal person. She told me, because I was talking to her a couple months ago, and she told me, the problem that we have in Russia is that American opposition still serves the United States.
Yes.
But Russian opposition also serves the United States. That's the problem they have. So when you have people, so you have lots of people in the USA who are extremely upset about Biden giving weapons to Israel to kill Palestinian kids, but none of them are going to go out and start blowing up military recruiting offices. None of them are going to go and start sabotaging American ships or planes or crashing drones into government buildings. No one here is going to do that. So I think to answer your question, Carl, I think it's just there is a parallel, but those people are not going to turn around and actually try to bring down the regime, because
they, of course not, but they stopped the supply ship. I forget if it's maybe Portland, Oregon. They stopped a big supply ship that was going to send weapons to Israel. At least that happened. But you're right.
The most extreme is going to happen. I mean, even after 9/11, this information all came out. When the FBI was actively trying to get people to commit acts of terrorism in the USA, going into mosques and trying to get Muslim people to riled up about it and to commit. The only people they ever successfully did it with were the mentally handicapped, isolated people, where you could basically manipulate them into doing something you could arrest them for. That they were never successful, even when they were trying to.
Their own anthrax attack.
Yes, they basically had to do their own acts of terrorism to get upset about. That was
Excellent point from Carlo and Ian. But I would, it's what brings me to the kind of subject, which might be kind of for you guys. I don't know what you think about it, but where I see parallel is that Zelenskyy does not really in his government of this kind of, he sides with this, like from the Western Ukraine, with this maniac nationalist. It doesn't represent Ukraine. He grabbed the power, and recently, the other day, he said, we are not going to have election because this is a wartime. So he and his kind of maniacs grabbed this power. And there are a lot of people from Eastern Ukraine to Central Ukraine and he was, by the way, he was actually elected on the promise of making deal with Russia, of trying to solve the Donbass problem. He was elected to do that. What he instead did, start escalating it, leading it almost on the brink of World War III. That's what he's doing. So how much he represents Ukrainian people, interest of common Ukrainian people whose children are sent to the butchery, who killed many Russians with whom they're relatives. So this is a peculiar thing. The same thing I would say about Hamas. Palestinians definitely have to have a very good, again, it's very complicated. There is Jerusalem, Western Jerusalem, one thing. There is a West Bank, another. There is Gaza, third one. But they have to be represented. Of course, it's maybe utopianism on one part, but they have to be represented by some kind of, state government which actually takes care of them rather than, pushing them. I understand aspect of that. Maybe future government should have somebody as hardcore as Netanyahu. You hit us, we hit you, because Israelis don't want to understand the language. But it cannot be the only government of this kind of totally militarist who think kind of. So it's consequently, maybe that's where the similarity is, that these hardcore governments, they push and push and push and bring a response back. People are dying, and consequently, actually, this kind of the wheel of violence get wider and wider.
Interesting perspective. I wanted to say that I think everybody still underestimates the value in public, public opinion, international public opinion. What happened to NATO in Ukraine? I mean, these were the Wunderwaffe, the unbeatable. The M1 Abrams is now going up in flames. The Panzer IIAs, the Bradleys every day of the week, the Caesars, the Patriots, everything. And February 2022, it was supposed to be the high-tech, undefeatable army. So while I can't explain Western Europe and the US public opinion, I can absolutely explain the global South, because what they saw there, basically, David has a chance against Goliath, to use that term. And that's what they see in Palestine. They've always seen in Palestine, David with a slingshot. But the enemy was undefeatable. It had this, you see an American carrier, you run, because that's undefeatable. That's the hand of God striking you down 2 days from now. And Russia showed the world, they have a latest ad. We can actually show that later, which is amazing, saying, join us in burning them, about NATO equipment from the Ministry of Defense of Russia. It's a wonderful advertisement. But it burst a bubble in the global South. Now, why there's still huge protests in France, other than, I think, decent, basically good souled people going out, even though you can pay, I think, 45,000 euros and go to jail for 2 years for insulting Israel or something like that. They're trying to crack down on it, but it's not happening. That's something I find difficulty in explaining. But obviously, even during Ukraine, we've seen differences between the public and the leadership, especially in the EU. But I think that's a huge sea change. What happened to 50 countries' pooled resources against Russia and it going up in flames? I think that's massive. And it basically echoes in this conflict to me.
Well, same thing as what happened to the IDF. Israel is a nuclear power, but that's never been their primary deterrent. It's always been their conventional power. And they'll even say this themselves. But Israeli leaders, Israeli authors will say this. It's always their first line of defense is their conventional strength. They always had this reputation of being undefeatable. And that cracks, and that started appearing in 2006 with Hezbollah, again with previous conflicts, like particularly in 2014 and 2021 with Hamas also. And now it's really just the facade is gone. They're not invincible.
That I don't know what a heritage minister does, but he got immediately suspended. He was on a radio interview, I don't recall the name, but the Israeli heritage minister saying nuking them is an option, which I thought would be too much for a title for today. But I guess, Maria Zakharova already asked, is this a public admission that you have a nuclear weapons program? A lot of people, Saudi Arabia sent a letter, we want the immediate resignation of this guy. That's serious, in diplomacy. So that stirred everything. That became out in front. Just saying it out loud was very interesting to me.
I wrote this yesterday on the blog that I think the main reason he got canned was because, like you just said, not because he threatened to wipe out a bunch of people, but because he publicly acknowledged the nukes, which you're not supposed to do in Israel. You're not supposed to, even if you're not in the government, you're not supposed to openly acknowledge the nukes.
Why is that, Ian? Do you know? Why is that a big no-no?
Because they want ambiguous.
Well,
because
they want ambiguity because it's against United States law to give them any military aid if they have nuclear weapons. So that's why they've got to keep it on the down low. They can't officially acknowledge it. The U.S. can't officially acknowledge it because if they did, the U.S. would be obligated by international law to stop giving them military aid. That's part of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, which we're all signatories of. Vladimir, go ahead, Vladimir.
Yeah, I would add, the ban brought the issue of NATO bubble and NATO equipment. But I think, there is a good line from, I think, Kissinger, who said that being American enemy is bad, but being its friend is deadly.
Yes.
So, so in other words, I think that American influence is not just on the sense of military, but I think they corrupt the politicians. These Israeli politicians, they used to be like, okay, we might take issue with them, but they were like hardcore military guys who slept with their soldiers in the trenches. They were like the experienced people. They were people. Now we have, look at this German leadership. Look at EU leadership. Look at Israeli leadership, who outside Netanyahu, they fly to Kiev, support, embrace the Nazis. They do this. So all the leadership are just, equally to NATO weapons. NATO leadership is just sick. I read the other day.
Oh, it's incompetent and stupid.
They're incompetent. They're incompetent. And what are they debating? I read the other day that Croatian male foreign minister tried to kiss this Ananela Byron.
I saw that.
And oh my God, the scandal. Nothing else to discuss. The world goes to pieces. They're like, okay, when in the football they discuss that the one Spanish guy kissed someone. Okay, this is football. But this is like foreign ministers. They're supposed to talk about what's going on. They don't have a clue. And the same thing, all this incompetent, they're incompetent in Europe. And in Israeli, this is, I would say, Israelis got this disease too. They were, at least, and they were talented people. Again, they would be like Rabin, who was a military guy, eventually realized we cannot, war. He made like an Oslo agreement. What was happened with him? He was killed.
Yep.
So in other words, there are a lot of very well known generals, top-notch guys who say we need to make an agreement, and then this idiotic two-bit politicians sponsored by the United States come and throw this idiot, order people, or totally destroy even military preparedness. I read, this is not my area of specialty, but once in a while you see something. So apparently there was some, experienced Israeli general who already in 2018 began to say that our army is not as good as it used to be. We're not quite ready. Again, why? Because they bring in all this, identity politics, PC things, these things. So it's all good. It plays out good on campuses.
On TikTok, it's good on TikTok.
Yeah, it's good on TikTok, but this is they were not quite ready. The prestige of armies is gone to pieces because they were involved in bad things. So consequently, that's the whole kind of chain of just not discrepancy, but malfunction from military to political. And I think we will see that. Look at the scandals. Endless amount of idiots in charge of England. There was like, Boris Johnson. Okay, he was a good journalist, but at least, okay. But then Liz Truss comes along, then another one comes along. They're like shameless. And this guy, probably he is okay, and is kind of a number cruncher, but I don't think
Brown Blair, Rishi Sunak is just a bank guy. That's it. He's rich, and that's it.
So, and this is consistent. But like, there was like a New Zealand leader, there was some other leaders, and they play along. They read the script which Blinken, failed figure, sends all around the world. This is a script for you to read, and that's what they do.
It's something worth noting that this very incompetent U.S. foreign policy team, which is Blinken, Kamala, Biden, these
Sullivan, there's another.
Sullivan, Kirby, maybe, they hate them. Not just the Arab leaders. Netanyahu hates them. Xi Jinping, Putin. Nobody can stand these people. Even the Europeans can't stand these people, and that's difficult when you're trying to do diplomacy. And I haven't seen much diplomacy done by the U.S. other than this little flying Blinken around thing. All the other people, all the other nations, they're crisscrossing all over the place. They're having multilateral meetings. There's going to be the, Islamic Cooperation Summit coming up this weekend. Russia and China are all over the place on phone calls, on meetings with all of these people. The US is just absent from this process. And I think for good reason, not just incompetence, they're unlikable.
But to go back to Ian's point, and Billy Bob rightly pointed out, that theoretically, formally, the United States cannot, or the Israelis cannot mention that they have received nuclear weapons from the United States, because it would violate international law. But when has the United States given a rat's rectum about international law?
Yeah.
Never.
No,
They're breaking thousands, literally
Yeah.
thousands of international laws as we speak. They're breaking over 1,000 against Cuba, which only has 11 million people. They have
what an amazing vote that was, by the way.
It's true. The precedent, though, the precedent is to not acknowledge their nuclear weapons, and that's going to keep them from having to deal with all these questions from all the reporters that they don't want to answer these questions.
They got the reporters in their pocket.
No, it's true. It's true. And so I kind of get your point. Like, why are they maintaining this facade to the degree that they are? And I can just imagine that it's easier. It's going to be even more messy if they don't. And they'd rather not deal with that mess. But you're right. They don't care. They don't care about law.
But is the answer that the facade is more powerful than hiding the truth? That everybody can acknowledge that the United States has supplied nuclear weapons to Israel. Everybody,
and I'm not even sure they're U.S. supplied. I mean,
so
we're not even saying they were U.S.
The facade says we're prepared to lie. We're prepared to lie at a level that broaches on apocalyptic. We're not above. We know that and we all know that we have done this.
Rules-based order.
Continue the lie, because the lie puts us in a position of demonization of ourselves. We become the demons, and those demons, you better watch out for, because this is the kind of people we are. We are vicious to the core. We are evil to the core, and to maintain this facade kind of points that out, because to give in to the notion that yes, we've done it, and to face the what kind of UN abrogation or no UN drivel that would come out about how they're against it. It's better to maintain this notion that we're this evil. This concealment is this evil. It's all over literature. Vladimir can attest to this. It's a technique in a lot of the best literature out there. I already talked about John Milton before the show, but there's this kind of this kind of it's better to like let these people know that we've done this, but never admit to it. That never give in. There's something about it.
Well, so I just shared a link in the chat here. It's got a headline and a picture with it. It's about Israel's Samson option. I wrote this yesterday. So basically, it's an explanation for why they're ambiguous. Because if I say I have nukes, the first question you're going to ask is like, well, okay, how big are those nukes? How many of them do you have? By being ambiguous, no one knows exactly what they're capable of. So I wrote about this in detail yesterday, but essentially they have what's called the Samson option. Samson is that biblical
Bring the
judge.
temple down on everyone.
Samson
Yes.
Agonistes. There's
Yes. So they would launch nukes, according to them, and this is actual Israeli authors who said this, they would launch nukes in all directions. They would take out as many different European cities as they could, specifically Europe, Rome, Paris, Berlin, maybe Moscow, so they don't want people to know if if they make a threat like that, people are like, well, are you even capable of doing that? So basically it's quite literally being a mad dog. They just want people to be afraid of their capabilities. And the best way to keep people afraid is be ambiguous. So there's a big difference between having 4 warheads and 400. They just don't want you to know how many they have. I think it's going to become really important for them moving forwards too. Now their conventional strength is a lot less than what people thought. And I want to say that conventional, to answer Carlo, your question about, actually, no, I'm going to be honest, I don't remember who said it, who's commenting on the military strength of Israel, how general, oh no, I'm sorry, it was you, Vladimir, who said that, talking about political correctness and TikTok and all that. But I think the big thing is, in the American militaries have the same thing. If you do police, what's essentially counterinsurgency warfare, if you do what's essentially a police action for a prolonged period of time, that really deteriorates your ability to wage conventional warfare. Because if you're guarding a checkpoint outside what's essentially an open air concentration camp, what you're not doing is you're not training, you're not doing maneuvers, you're not practicing actual warfare. So when the call comes, okay, you need to get into a tank and go into that city and actually fight in close quarters, they're not going to be any good at it. And that shouldn't actually be a surprise, because it's been decades since.
Well, so
there's good video evidence that Hamas, on the other hand, has been practicing with very low tech, low yield things, but doing some amazing things.
So you guys agree with Douglas McGregor and Scott Ritter on the readiness of the Israeli forces?
Well,
Scott
says there's hundreds. Scott says the estimate is Israel has a couple hundred nuclear weapons. But I do agree. They also do disparage Israeli conventional forces. So they disparage those, but they acknowledge that Israel probably has about 200 weapons. But the reason Israel doesn't acknowledge that, the reason the U.S. doesn't acknowledge that, is because the U.S. Would open up a whole can of worms about why are they violating international law. So, it's tough, because I know that they don't really care about international law, but yet they care enough to maintain this policy of ambiguity. But I think it's more about that than anything else. But good points by everyone.
Point.
Vladimir, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I also want to get when I'm hearing you talk about the Israel issue, it kind of sounds like the United States. We're basically good people, for the most part. We want peace, we want prosperity like everybody else, but we're beholden to this non-representative government that has, plans and ideas that are completely, distinct from what our interests are. And so I'm sure the same thing is true in Israel to a point, but Israel kind of has a bigger problem. And in my analysis, it's about Zionism and the idea that Israel is going to be a state for people who are Jewish, and that's a problem, because it's kind of like apartheid South Africa, in my opinion, and where you have a racial hierarchy or even religious hierarchy, if you don't want to use the term race, but where non-Jews are second-class citizens in this country. And I mean, that to me is a big problem with Israel, and it means that the state of Israel as a Jewish state is somewhat not legitimate. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's an excellent question, and thanks for asking. Again, I'm not an absolute specialist, but I think let's start where you started, this like sort of parallel of United States and Israel. Yeah, but let's think about this: that United States, I don't need to prove it to you, has a very bad a legacy of racism, right? For many, it still continues. It still continues. Blacks on the streets are harassed by the cops, blah blah blah. Nevertheless, we somehow see the potential. We see like certain progression. You have to be like absolutely like hardcore anti-white to say that we're not making progress. We are making some progress. I see kids in colleges. I see kids being in all walks of life from all kind of shades of colors. So in other words, I Israel also some kind of a project. What they got stuck with is this. I agree with you. This issue of identity, like U.S. already, we have this kind of constitution, which more or less tries. Of course, even constitution. First, it was only just for white males. Then we start kind of embracing people. So I think that Israel, yes, they have this issue in identity. Who constitutes the state? And it's not a very pretty picture, especially in 21st century, because in 21st century we do want to start with a premise of equality. When you have this kind of idea that Jews are sort of foundational, but I wouldn't say that this is essentially a kind of burden which will sink Israel. I envision it, and I see it, when I go there, like, my mom was in a hospital, doctor was, Arab, and the nurses were, Arab. They embraced me when my mom was sick, saw me crying with the same warmth I embraced them. So in other words, it's not like, we have some kind of policeman standing on every corner and saying this entrance for Jews, this entrance for non-Jews. They don't have it like that. So I see as some kind of, if people will try it, somehow maybe in the future they will reconsider their constitution and reformulate it. But yes, again, I would say, from my limited knowledge of the government, and this is like, we can complain a lot about US, but maybe this two-party system is better than what they have. In other words, no matter who is in power in Israel has to accommodate absolute right-wing Zionists who would take no for an answer, who will just, they're like the mirror image of Hamas. They will just say, we can build, Jewish constructions on every sacred site. We can push settlement. Yes, but I would say again, this is something which we know in history. People change. Russia changed. Russia used to be Tsarist, then it became Stalinist, then it became socialist. So things change. It doesn't mean that they are kind of doomed. But yes, it is a very serious problem. Which but in all fairness, I know that Israelis are unbelievably smart and savvy people. They're aware of that. And I hope that this kind of good forces will get there before the bad guys would build something, provoke another attack, and then some idiot would drop a nuclear bomb, or like Ian said, set up the Samson option. But on this little final note is that idea of nukes is some kind of deterrence. So every country uses it as deterrence. Every country probably like Trump, who said he had more money than he had. Every country wants to say that we have more nukes than we have, just to sort of scare other people out. So I guess that's what they do.
I wish I could be that positive. I knew you reminded me of someone. It's Steven Pinker. Things are getting better slowly, and everybody should relax. But yeah, I can respect that. We have a multitude of opinions here. So, Ian, you wanted to?
I have a question for Vladimir. I don't want to take up too much of your time here, but I was curious because you are on a college campus, so I am curious, because you do see these younger, these college-age Americans from all walks of life. What do you see? And I don't know how much you talk about politics in your classes or just on campus, but just seeing all these different Americans in their, teens and 20s, how do they feel about the U.S. government, about Biden, especially in light of Ukraine and now Gaza and Israel? What do you see Do you see that conflict, like Carlo was talking about, like what is going on? We're supporting Israel and Ukraine. They can't both be victims. What's going on here? Do you see any of that clicking in their heads? What's the reaction?
Unfortunately, I don't. And I think it's probably, I teach at elite school where basically to get into the school, you have to have your radars, very radars, kind of very alert, not to provoke, not to say something which is not accepted. So they are, I imagine maybe in Ohio State, when people would run and protest, and they don't want to rock the boat. They got into the college to not to rock. Of course, we here on campus there have been some, like at Columbia, at Harvard, there were certain protests. But in terms of Ukraine, I think a lot of students follow the party line, what's written in newspapers, what they hear there. So they're not quite ready. I think also they are dealing with very serious issues. Whoever is studying, they're thinking of their careers. They're very much preoccupied with getting some. I don't see that much activism. It just more or less playing along. I mean, maybe at some other colleges it's happened differently. Once in a while, students would ask me, and I would chat with them. I wouldn't hide what I think, but usually people who ask me, they'll be like, not your average Americans. It'll be somebody from Singapore, somebody from Norway, somebody from Italy, people who take a different look. But Americans are kind of, they're charging ahead. They want to succeed. I cannot blame them. I mean, maybe at their age, I was thinking the same thoughts.
Yeah, the only time it'll change here is if we get in another hot war and have conscription.
Yes.
That'll turn it around overnight. Everybody will become educated.
I thought that was a heartwarming, like almost teardrop moment for the description of elite universities. It was a really good one.
Where my daughter went, Brown. But
Brown is like top 5 or something, right?
Yeah, it's an Ivy League school. It's with Harvard and Yale. Yeah.
They've got too much to lose to risk any kind of advocacy or even really care about it. I mean, they're like you said, they're career oriented.
I would add even one more fascinating thing, and for me it was very kind of heartwarming and disturbing at the same time. We have at Brown this institution called Watson Institute, which was originally given money by one of the Watsons, have to do probably with IBM fortune. And this Watson Institute has been first. Originally, it was actually supposed to study Cold War and Russia. Now it's turned into like study of foreign affairs. So they invited some real insider from Washington, who actually wrote a very interesting book on that it's time for U.S. establishment to engage Russia. That Russia is too important a figure, from nuclear proliferation to Middle East to issues of like climate, to be bullied and pushed. So this was
the last 2 years. When did
it happened yesterday? Actually, I went there, to the store. And so he said, my talk is not very popular. My view. He wrote a book. His name is Thomas Graham. He is part of the establishment, but he's a member of this, what is it, Center for Foreign Affairs, one of those big think tanks in Washington. Said it's not very popular, but that's what I realized. We need to strategize. Actually, a lot of students were saying, "Oh, are you betraying Ukraine? What kind of opposition is this?" If we start getting engaged, none of the students ever took. I saw them in my class, but they were all they know that this is what we have to say, that Ukraine defends our values somewhere. So they were challenging this Washington insider of moving away from the line which was set up for them. It was kind of a little fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not surprising. Not surprising to hear that. It's unfortunate that that's the reality, but it definitely doesn't surprise me.
If you look at economic news or financial news, then you understand where the wind is blowing from. It's time to engage the rest of the world, not cut them off. Yeah,
absolutely true.
So I could push back one more time on the Zionism and the idea of Zionism and how Israel ought to maybe, like South Africa, right? South Africa still exists. It's just no longer an apartheid state. And I think that's where Israel needs to go. I think it needs to. And so, is that what you were referring to, Vladimir, when you talked about constitutional changes? Because these are codified, right? It's a constitutional thing that. Well, I don't think Israel has a constitution, but it's set up in its legal framework that it's the Jewish state. And so, are you would be in favor of maybe not taking that out of their legal framework?
Can I please add to that question so you can answer in two parts? I wonder if you have an opinion about there's huge groups of, I think they call themselves Torah Judaists, the Jewish people who are anti-Zionist, and they think just the establishment and the function of that state is a crime. Like multitudes around the world, including in Hungary. By the way, we have the 13th largest absolute Jewish minority in the world, which is why our president flew to Tel Aviv immediately. But yeah, we are at the top, very strong support. But those people, I wonder if you have an opinion on
I
that.
think, that's what's sort of well known about the Jews. You have like 2 Jews and 3 opinions. So there is always people have diverse opinions. And I think this is a good aspect of that. They are like hardcore liberal, Oh, by the way, if you read Haaretz, it's actually much more diverse opinions than what we read in New York Times or BBC or something like that. So they have diverse opinions. But, unfortunately, as I said, if you're a ruling party, you have to deal with this with hardcore kind of Zionists who think that that's where we're going, and they have to be accommodated. And consequently, we have situations. I know I read all this Russian dimensions. There will be some kids from Russian Jewish families. The kid will still technically not Jewish because his mother was Russian or something, drafted in the army, killed in the war, and then some guys say, no, you cannot be buried in a cemetery where all the war heroes. You have to be buried somewhere else because we have this kind of religious tradition running the country. This is a joke. The guy dies for his country and cannot be buried where other soldiers are buried. But I think so. That's what Israel has. It's part of their identity. They're still, I imagine, they're still trying to find their way. They're making a fair amount of mistakes. But I think that South Africa is probably the direction where I envision they will go. They have to somehow, because with this 21st century, there are too many people, and they actually interact. It's not like some mythical Arabs or mythical Jews somewhere. They play together, they end together. They need to find some way where people will be treated absolutely equally.
Well, you see, the difference is though with South Africa and Israel is South African ties had no religious dimension. They had deep cultural dimensions among the people who originally lived there and the interlopers, but they had no religious dimension. And I'd like to get people's opinion on the United States, where this white Christian nation notion has been taking hold and going in the opposite direction and gaining ground constantly. I mean, I live here, and I can see it happening every day. Look at the new Speaker of the House. Look at the Papist Supreme Court. We have a Supreme Court that has, what is it, 6 or maybe 7 Catholics on it. My God, and only one of them is a liberal, and 2 of them, 3 of them are from fanatical cults in the Catholic Church. So and you just had Scalia, who was a nutbag. He was insane. If you read his opinions, you couldn't make heads or tails of them. And you have this totally corrupt Thomas. And who's also Catholic, and disguised as an African American. It's like I expect Thomas to go home, and when he gets off work, he takes off his suit, and then he peels off this skin, and he's a white man underneath. My God! And it's a white Christian nation. That's in that direction. It's that arrow is precise. I have cousins dozens of cousins who have converted to evangelical Christianity in Ohio and primarily in Virginia, and they are fanatics, and 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 they don't tolerate anyone else. I mean, they do, toward African Americans. They most of them have this acceptance, but beyond that, there's very little tolerance. There's certainly there's no outward acceptance of anyone of a religion. See, the African Americans are basically seen, their roots, their religious roots are basically seen in the Christian church anyway. So that's a big step for them. But people like Jews, people like Muslims, people like from Eastern religions, no, not happening, not accepted, and it's a growing movement. So
Well, I mean, obviously the history of tolerance and everybody getting along is getting better. Like the trajectory is getting better. I don't think the Klan, for instance, is gaining in numbers, but definitely the opportunities and the treatment of people of color, religious minorities is on the it's going one way. It's not going down. It's going up. I haven't seen any real solid evidence that trend is reversing. I know a lot of people want to blame Trump for that trend reversing, and I don't really buy that. But you compare it to the 50s or 60s. I mean, are we a better or a more tolerant or less tolerant society?
No, probably less tolerant, because now they know how to do it without being a parent. Now they know how to get the guy elected Speaker of the House. Now they know how to enter Congress. Now the Koch brothers know how to support ALEC and sit on every board in every city and town in this country. Have mayors in every every town and city.
Do you think there's more black mayors now than there were in the 60s and 70s?
Yes, and you can buy people, and you can fool people, and that's a large part of it. Now, generally, what happens with mayors is that mayors get cities and towns after the white oligarchs have sucked them dry and made sure that they're going to be economic failures. And they inevitably are economic failures because there's no industry left in those towns to support those towns. So, sure, what if you had a chicken and you ate all the meat off the chicken and just had the bones, and you had somebody that was so hungry he'd take the bones. That's what a black mayor means. They always criticize Chicago. That's after Chicago has been absolutely devastated, sucked dry by the Daily Machine for decades. Him and his goddamn son, and that's the way all these cities are.
I can't really speak to the U.S. I live in California, so I don't know.
No, you're in
I'm in a different country.
Really?
I'm really in a different country.
I would add to Carlo, I mean, something which you kind of, I think, indicated. I don't want to look at the situation from the top bottom, but from the bottom up, I think embrace of religion in U.S. is probably a response to economic pressures. It's like people are very, losing ground. They're losing ground, maybe the same thing, all over the world, but here in particular. So they think that somehow kind of joining this church or becoming more and more kind of, ingrained. So that's kind of my view of that. So it is kind of disturbing, but that's the way it is. So I think I still believe economy is at the foundation of the whole thing.
I'm with you, but can I add my 10 cents as outside looking in? Eastern Europe. I'm not exactly in America myself, but what I remember from the 1990s, the big conventions, where a lot of Republicans started to vote Clinton because they thought these evangelical, it was very Christian, the other side, what do you call it? The GOP was very, very strong. And immediately, even before 9/11, the new atheist movement started, who became the most rabid, basically Muslimophobes in the world. They were the ones to go bomb Iraq and all that. They lost a lot of ground. For me, it looks like publicly at least. This self-takeover that you're talking about, Carlo, might still be true. But publicly, I haven't seen a lot of them anymore. I mean, Michelle Bachmann, the crazy-eyed evangelical woman, was back in the news as this broke out, and she said wokeness was to blame for the terrorist attack on Israel, and that's all I saw from them for the last 10 years. So for me, that force, that evangelical Republican force, seems to be hugely receding and trying to find relevance here and there, you know. But
No, I disagree, Mark.
I'm on the outside.
I grew up in an evangelical church, actually.
I'm on the outside.
In California, actually, a Baptist church, evangelical church in California. And they were very big. And yes, it was very much a pro-Israel community. White Christians, evangelicals in the USA are very, very pro-Israel. In fact, I remember
they're more hardcore Zionists than
Zionists, for God's sake. Yes. Well, it's because, like, I remember my youth pastor was telling me, like, we got to support Israel because in the end times, all the Arabs are going to line up, and the Chinese are going to be. He actually mentioned the Chinese specifically. This is back in the 1990s. So, you know, it's just, I don't know, maybe because China was like that stereotypically huge country with 1 billion people in it. So of course they'll send an army to help defeat the Christians, I guess, and Israel. And so it's very much it's weird and creepy. It's kind of very much a doomsday. Literally a doomsday, because the end time is their interpretation of the end times, the book of Revelation.
Right. Yeah. Israel is central because that's where the final battle, the Megiddo, is going to take place. So yes, I think they don't give a rat's rectum about Jews. Believe me.
Of course not.
They don't care.
They kill Christ, I think.
It's just that in their warped little tiny reptilian brains, that's where the world is going to end. And that's where they're all going to be taken up to heaven. And everybody else, all their relatives are going to be with them, and all of us will be in hell. That's the deal with those
Michelle Bachmann mentioned the rapture as well. Yeah,
you know, and this Bobert and this nutty stuff that these people spout.
It's a good date if you can get her to go to the movies with you.
If you want to see how active these people are, how many militias they are, read Southern Poverty Law Center. These are the people that had bankrupted certain parts of the Klan, but anti-Semitism, according to them, and I trust them because I've worked with them since the 80s, is up 400% in this country. So and believe me, I know who's doing it.
I would say, I would add to that, and this is definitely a strike against kind of Netanyahu, who is in his cynicism kind of bets on these people. You know, Israel has to figure out, you know, as you know, I keep an argument that, you know, they need new leaders who, again, perceive the world in its complexity, not just, you know, acting like Zelenskyy, kissing US ass and getting money for that. This is not a viable, milking the cow. This is not a viable policy, especially for this complicated, you know, society with torn apart in all directions. They have to be, you know, much smarter than trusting this loonies you're referring to. But, you know, but he comes, you know, Republicans usher him into the Congress. He points this map on Iran and thinks, okay, I got another $50 billion. And Zelenskyy sits there salivating, oh, I should have done the same thing. I should have bring not just Russia, but Iran is against us too. Then Zelenskyy will be
North Korea is against Ukraine.
That's
bring a map of North Korea.
That's it.
And you use all the buzzwords: freedom, democracy. They're the terrorists. I mean, all that rhetoric.
Yeah. But anyway,
I was thinking maybe we can all have a laugh with a couple of skips from this Zelenskyy interview that he did, the whatever nation. I think we're all going to enjoy this one. They're both very short. Here goes one.
I have a lot of power, not even feeling strong and have a lot of energy. It doesn't mean that we want to fight all our life, because the price is high, like I said, because the war takes the best of us, the best heroes, the best men, women, children. That's it.
And here it comes.
But we are not ready to give our freedom to this terrorist Putin. That's it.
Yeah.
That's why we are fighting. That.
I absolutely love that. The question was, by the way, how do you find the energy or something like that to keep going? And the second, this is a longer answer, but I'm just going to keep the short bit of it that's relevant. What are you going to do if the support runs out? Is the question. The answer.
The third one, if you can't give us some financial support, okay, please give us a credit, and we will give you back money after the war.
I thought that was worth watching together.
I agree with you. This is like ridiculous.
I want to say Zelenskyy reminds me of a very specific type of people. So if you go to St. Petersburg, so of course St. Petersburg is probably one of the most notorious tourist traps in Russia. So there's
Leningrad, the Venice of Russia.
So there's these, yes, the Venice, the northern Venice. So there's these very aggressive, performers and panhandler type peoples who are looking for tourists to scalp, right? So so they'll often have pigeons, or they'll be in a costume or something like that. They'll have some shtick that they're pushing.
Well, that's what he did
and
on stage.
And they talk like that too. That very stereotypical broken English with a very aggressive, overly familiar tone. He's like, "Hello, yes, you give me money, I give you more back." It's just very, very. Those are the people I think of when I see Zelenskyy talk in English. Because when they realize you're a foreigner, they switch to English and start talking to you. That exactly like he does.
And did you? There's a big scandal. You probably read about it the other day in his government. His Minister of Defense named Zelenskyy, his right-hand man,
the commander of the armed forces, his aide blew himself up. That's one of the versions.
So he's celebrating this is like so absurd. He's celebrating his birthday. So somebody, that's what they say, gives him a gifts of like rare things. What are these rare things? Hand grenades and Scotch whiskey. So while he apparently started opening whiskey, his 13-year-old son started opening the grenade. I mean, these are the people who are like vice minister of defense. They're in charge of the whole country. So he blew himself up. He's killed. His son is, you don't know where we start. That doesn't know what weapons are. Who gives the gifts like that? Who opens the grenade? It just. And when you think it's total incompetence, talking about these politicians in American pocket, this is the material they're dealing with.
Yeah, Zelenskyy already faced the nation. He did an address that it's not my birthday, thank God, and don't send me anything. I thought that was also funny because that's the official, by the way, the official police report is it's an accident, a mishandling of explosive. That's where we're going. In the meantime, there's this Arestovich, who looks like Birdman Michael Keaton, who's positioning himself, saying, I'm going to go for president, but obviously that was cancelled. I would, if the CIA is bugging Zelenskyy's private meltdowns, please leak that. Please, I want to listen to that. I want to watch that, especially if there's video. That will be entertainment for years to come. But I don't think there's a huge amount of time left for that, man.
My recent Facebook post was just about people who were saying that they're unhappy with the Nasrallah speech. They were hoping, Iran and Hezbollah would get more involved. And my point was that, we shouldn't be surprised that Nasrallah is being prudent and not being
perfect speech for what it was.
Getting involved, escalating. And so my whole point was that, Russia and China's job and Iran's job is to manage this declining empire in a way that, limits and minimizes the amount of fallout for the rest of the global economy and, people's lives, basically. So I just think that's when we're dealing with people like Zelenskyy that we just saw, like Sullivan, Blinken, and those people, and then Netanyahu. It's not easy. It's not easy to manage the decline of these people's power, and that's what we're doing. The decline is inevitable, and it can go out with a bang or they can go out with a whimper, and everybody's trying to get them to go out quietly.
One of the funniest, but it was a serious thing. I think an op-ed I read on RT late last week after Nasrallah's speeches. It's time for Russia to protect Zelenskyy, and I think it was a serious take by someone that we don't want this guy splattered on the wall somewhere, because then who's next? It was interesting. But maybe that's a good place to leave it, Billy Bob. Managing the decline of the hegemon as best we can.
I've got another 2 hours, so we can keep going. No,
well, in a few hours, we'll manage the decline very well.
I don't feel like I'm managing anything. I feel like I'm in free fall with it all. That's the way I feel.
So we can wrap it up. If nobody's going to give a final point, I just want to thank everybody very much. Carlo, we are glad you made it today. We always appreciate your contribution. Vladimir, thank you very much.
Yes.
You had a lot of great things to say. We appreciate you coming on and spending an hour and a half with us. Ian, thank you so much for coming from Moscow. I'm going to link to your website, of course, in the comments. Ben, thank you. We will be back on Friday for episode 31 of the Blowback Roundtable. I'll see everybody then. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Enjoy